Hello, everyone, and welcome to Accelerating Your Implementation Guide Production. My name is Bart Wijstra, and I'll be the moderator for your session. Please put any questions in the Q&A section in Whova, and I will try to answer them or ask José to answer them. José is your presenter today. We'll have two sessions with a half-hour break in between, where José will take you through building implementation guides, what's important, and how to do that with the IG publisher. So as I mentioned, the presenter is José Costa Teixeira, and he is a consultant with IMEC and works for HL7 Belgium. José, please take it away.
Hi everyone. Welcome and thank you, Ward, for this introduction and for the preparation. Yes, today we will be looking at how to accelerate or how to increase the production of implementation guides in your settings. So I want to start by mentioning a bit of the context about myself. I'm a consultant. I'm working within IMEC, a research institution in Belgium, and for this I work for several institutions, namely authorities, some of the authorities in Belgium, and the payer institutions. So the insurance, the national insurance payer. In this activity, we also started HL7 Belgium, which I'm currently chairing. And one of my responsibilities is actually something like the things that we're talking about today. It's to enable everyone to increase the production of standards compliant specifications. We want everyone to have an easy path to create FHIR specifications, and for this, our role and mission in HL7 Belgium is the preparation of everyone that wants to do that, to make it as simple as possible. So there's a lot of good things that might be useful for you to know, so that you can create implementation guides in a very short time and in a compatible format, compatible in the sense that everyone will understand quickly what you're talking about, and there's a lot of facilitation that I'm going to introduce here and in the last build. So today we'll see some practices, maybe a bit of context and theory, not theory in the sense of how it works in the behind, but what is the context to this? Why do we need these things? And then the next build, in the let's build session, we are going to put it in practice, to just go together to the implementation of an implementation guide from zero to a fully working implementation guide. And I would like to guide you through that. So during the session today, please, since we have this half-an-hour break, you're welcome to stay in the break and ask any questions. You're welcome to challenge, to ask questions, to interrupt the session if you think the questions are applicable, or if something was interesting. If it's a practical question, please leave it to the practical session. Otherwise, feel free to interrupt, because with the extra half hour we have enough time. So a bit of context. Several entities in Belgium, so governmental institutions, industry associations, they have defined a process for creating or for defining interoperability mechanisms. The situation that we have in Belgium is that everyone can create an implementation guide. It has to be within a context, so everyone can create an implementation guide as it is the practice in the FHIR community, but not everyone, of course, can create a legal standard. So this is reserved for the government to do this. But there is a process that everyone can contribute with their specifications or with their ideas, and then it goes through an acceptance process. And the path, although there's a bit of a complicated diagram in the screen, it's not really complicated. It's just that anyone can join a working group in Belgium. We facilitate those working groups. We have currently 3 active working groups. We prepare the tooling, like the tooling that I'm going to show today. And from this, we say, let's work on the things that matter for the governments, for the official institutions, or let's see if the industry has any pressing needs and they want to standardize it. The difference between those is actually, it's only that if the government wants to do an implementation guide or some specifications, they will do this because the government approval is kind of expected or implicit. If the industry wants to follow that path, They still have a path to produce community standards, so an HL7 Belgium implementation guide. If they want that to become even more assertive or even stronger, they still have the path to get the government to provide the blessing, let's say, and the approval. And that approval is simply the inclusion on the roadmap, and then it gets published in a different platform. So in Belgium, we work with implementation guides, let's say, for the masses, and the federal implementation guides, they are hosted on Simplifier, and then we managed to work with those together. The biggest challenge has been, and it's a good challenge, is that we have the community, a very growing community. We have lots of different types of groups. We have terminology groups. We have more functionally oriented groups. We have technical teams. We have different topics to cover. And at some point, it becomes really difficult because the same people have to be in different places. So our effort is to industrialize, to say, this is the formula, go and do it, and do it in the right manner, so that the committees that have to approve, they can approve easily, and that the people can be more productive. Or if we have some functional issues, functional question or technical issues, it's not always the same core group that has to do all the work. So we are putting a lot of effort into make sure that we enable that growth of the community. Let's see, as a context, so as a generalization of our context of what we want to do, is any institution or organization, so official institution or any company or association of patients, for example, they can decide to implement some specifications or to adopt some specifications. So we want to give them the capability to produce those specifications. This means that they will work in layers. I will show how this works better in the next slides. But it means that the government has government standards, and they are valid for everyone. One region in Belgium, so the Dutch-speaking region in Belgium, they might have different constraints than the French-speaking community in Belgium, and Brussels might have a different set of constraints. That is normal. Those are autonomous regions, and they can decide some things. If it's a federal standard, and of course it has the influence over all of those. So it becomes kind of a layered approach. And even with these differences, we want to support that there is a consistent process, like the one that I mentioned, that everyone should follow a similar process, that as much as possible, the content is reusable. We don't want anyone to do, for example, a vaccine logical data model, if that logical data model has already been done by one of the regions. So we want to reuse the content. We also want to use to increase the consistency of the layout and the look and feel, so that if you're looking at an implementation guide, you are kind of aware that maybe the first two menu items, they are more for functional people, and the menu items to the right, they are more for the technical people. This is just one choice like any other, but we want to enforce some consistency so that it's easier for people to find what they are looking for. As you might be aware, many of you will be aware, making an implementation guide is quite easy, and today we are going to make it even easier. So there is always the risk of becoming easier to just do your own thing and stay in your own silo than look at what others are doing. So while we are facilitating the creation of implementation guides, we also want to facilitate that people look at implementation guides from others and they see what is happening, so that they can adopt that content as much as possible. And this being done, of course, in parallel, many parallel tracks, like the different work groups, industries, and the government having some initiatives as well. It has to be managed in parallel, so that we don't have to wait for everyone to be finished so that we publish everything. We have several ongoing tracks, and most of this is based, or is really endorsing an iterative development. We cannot wait for the perfect specifications, because they will not be there. And even if we thought they were there, they would be there, they would take forever to have maybe just one value set that is missing, that's blocking the whole thing. We want really to enforce iterative development. All of these things, they are very much echoed or mirrored in the tools and the techniques that I'm going to share with you today, and that we are going to discuss and do in the Let's Build session. So, context and scope of action. We have concurrent and layered creation of specs, as I mentioned. So we have the global standards like HL7, we have the legal standards, we have the community standards, we have the project standards. I'll get there in a second. There's a diagram coming for that. We also want to have a single process, as I mentioned. We want to have common implementation guide models. I'll share in the Let's Build session a couple of those models, but we want to have kind of templates to work with. Way of working and guidelines, like using the logical models as much as possible, providing examples as much as possible, these kind of guidelines, and the templates in the sense of look and feel templates. That's something that we are going to work today. And then the collaboration, like how do we do this in the continuous build, segmentation of work, so that different people can work on different things, and the feedback loops. So concretely, we are going to make later we are going to make an implementation guide and put all those things in there. We are going to put a template, we are going to change the colors of the template, we are going to put some feedback loops in there so that everyone can see what are the current issues. We are going to set up the continuous build in at least one of the ways, depending on your feedback. We are going to have different kinds of content being fed into the implementation guide. So we are going to play with all of that. And just to put us in the right scene, this is what I meant with the layered approach. There is there's the Firebase specification, which is common for everyone. No one can deviate from that. But then we have standard constraints that are even outside of Belgium. For example, we have the HL7 implementation guides. We have IHE profiles. We can have some open HIE guides or any other institution that provides implementation guides or guidance that we want to adopt. So we, on top of the Fire specification, we can adopt already some domain-specific or region-specific implementation guides. For example, if Europe or if the teams in Europe decide to say this is how you do the vaccination certificate, then we don't have to invent it, we just reuse that. On top of that, we can have national guidance. We can say, this is interesting, but I need to put my own vocabularies, my own value sets. Or this is interesting, but in my country, this field is mandatory, or the middle name does not exist, or the patient, I don't know, region or city is something that's a bit more of a complex context, and it's not really like that. We want to change something. So we make different cardinalities in the national guidance. And then on top of all that, we have project specifications. Project specifications would be, for example, this vault has their specifications, or this small company, this startup, we want to make our specifications. I'm saying this because a few months ago, I saw one big institution, they were trying to make their own fire specifications, and they did not see the power of implementation guides. So they were doing everything by hand. They were creating PDF documents out of this to make it official. And at some point, it's just easier to say, let's just make an implementation guide for our company on top of the existing guidance that exists at the national level or international level. So these are the layers, and as you can imagine, these layers can replicate. So maybe I have I work in a multinational, and my multinational company has that blue bar there is very big. It has lots of things, and I still want to make it specific for this customer or for this project or for that implementation. So this is a layered approach, and we can add as many layers as we want. The ones that we use implementation guides for is, of course, the ones that are in the green zone. And everyone can make an IG, and that's what we're going to do today. And we want to make it very, very easy. On the content, we really strive to have content consistency. So we want to have some guidance on what kind of content do we want to require in our specifications. So after some discussion, we are kind of sticking to creating the model of our implementation guide. So defining a few things that should be in an implementation guide, and from then it's easy to create rules. For example, in that diagram that we have there, it's rather old and it was rather optimistic because already last year we were hoping to have test scripts and test data fully integrated in the implementation guide. That does not exist, or that's not possible yet. Soon it will be, but it's not just yet. But once we do that, and you can go to that implementation guide that's in the link below, we can do funny things like establishing naming conventions. So if we have a profile, then maybe the profiles in Belgium, they start with BE. So BE patient, BE communication, BE medication request. Well, that one will not exist. It will have a different name, but we can start having specific naming conventions. Again, just to help people guide and understand what we are talking about. And also, and in this diagram, the key thing is that you see here the separation of effort. You have people that are focused on vocabulary. This is the situation in Belgium. We have, and in many countries, we have vocabulary experts, and they are providing what value sets do we want for this. They are not fire experts. They have a knowledge of fire, but they are not going into the modeling themselves. They just provide either an Excel sheet or some other way to create a code system or a value set. But they can work relatively uncoupled from the technical implementation teams, which are the ones that provide the profiles and the operation definitions and the search parameters and the examples and the example scenarios. And if we have it, the transaction. So that's also something that we want to include, but it's not right there yet. On top of that, we have the functional module, and that was an important thing for us. We decided to have a way that we validate our specifications before this gets too technical. I will explain. If we're talking to a physician, if we're talking to a nurse, they will get lost the moment, or hopefully they will not, but most likely they will get lost the moment that we show them a fire resource, even if it's extremely user-friendly to use and we can navigate and we can click and we can explain. The moment that you want to have something for your country, for your company, you need to have extensions, you need to have slices. And the concept of showing the data elements, that's still easy, but the concept of why is this different color than that one, or why is this is an extension, why do I need an extension because that's the data that I want, it becomes a bit more difficult for them to relate. And in fact, it's not their job. Their job is to say, I need the patient to have one name and one country of birth. That's it. I need the patient to have one date of birth, and I need the patient to have optionally one time of birth. That's it. That's all they care about. For this, we started using from a very early phase logical models. So everything that we do in Belgium from a given time, so almost from the beginning, everything that we have, we always start with a logical model. So the logical models, for those of you who don't know, it's basically an abstract or more abstract representation of data where we can do whatever we want with the data. We can say, this is the patient, this is my object, my patient object, and my patient object will contain date of birth, time of birth, even if those are not directly attributes of the resource, but we can model it as such. Next to that, we also have some narrative, but also we have use cases. We started endorsing the creation of use cases. In fact, as part of the process that I mentioned before, that there's an official process, one of the first things that the teams have to define to create an official project, which has then a chance of becoming a federal standard or a federal governmental standard, is indeed to provide some use cases. Without defining the use cases, we all know, we are in IT, we all know that without defining the use cases, it's hard to work. But the variability of what is a use case, if you ask a nurse what is a use case, she says, I just want to click the button and that's it. If you ask an IT expert what's a use case, he will have an opinion. If you ask another IT expert, he might have a completely different opinion of what is a use case. So we want to also to standardize a bit how these things will be in the implementation guide. And we started segmenting those. So functional module is for use cases. Services is a bit of the definition. Let me just give an example. If I have a medication prescription, the medication prescription might have one profile, two extensions, a couple of value sets, and that it's a big bunch of resources, a potentially big bunch of resources. And then that medication request profile might be used in different places. It might be used for submitting a prescription, but might be used in an overview of a patient's medication. Well, it's also important to give the context where this information is going to be used. So it's important to say, I'm going to define the service of creating a prescription. The most recent case that everyone has been looking at in their countries is the vaccination. One thing is creating the service of registering the vaccination. So when the nurse gives the vaccine, this is the information that he or she need to provide to the system. Another completely different thing is using that information in a vaccination certificate, because the data needs will definitely be different. So depending on the service that you're using, then you have different data needs. So it's really important to at least identify those services as you are defining the functional module. Once those things are roughly in place, and again, they don't have to be finished, it's all iterative. But once we have a couple of use cases and a couple of logical models, or one logical model, then the technical teams, the FHIR technical teams, they can say, good, let me make the profiles. Let's make the profiles. Let's use Forge. Let's use Sushi. Let's do the technical work. But then we are already a bit decoupled. We don't have to ask the nurse, is this an extension or is this a dedicated resource? They should not care about that. The same thing with the support. So once everything is there, we make the capability statements, test script, and test data. So these are still things that we are working on. So I'm not going to mention them today because we don't have good guidance to give. But the idea is also that after that is done, we need to say, okay, this implementation guide needs to be needs to support the many companies that are going to connect to our system. So let's make the capability statement, because the system is going to has to have one. Let's make the test scripts, because we want people to know what to test, and let's of course provide some test data so that people realize if their data is compatible with this or not. So this was a bit of an introduction to what kind of content we are looking at. Now let's get a bit more into what do we do with this. Remember when I said that there was a bit of there was a first part of there was a template. I mentioned the templates in the beginning. One thing that we have, it's relatively recent. We will play with this, but we created the templates for everyone to start and create their IG. For those of you who were in the sushi session yesterday with Mark Kramer, you will have seen that it's very easy to create an implementation guide on sushi. You just type it and type a few things, and the sushi does it all for you. Using Forge, you can also do the content and the implementation guide. You can upload to Simplifier. So the whole ecosystem is there for you. In the implementation guide, we thought that we can use that, but some of the changes that we are going to do today, maybe we want to freeze them. We want to say, for Belgium, this is the default, additional functionalities, additional things that we want to do, maybe the color scheme, maybe the logos, and we don't want people to know how that works if they can just take it done from the shelf. So we wanted to have a more ready product. So we created two templates, so GitHub templates in the sense of so templates in the sense of GitHub. Basically, those things you just clone, you create your own repository, and from then on you have a working IG with empty content, so you don't even have to type anything on Sushi. You just clone those things and you just run the scripts, and that's it. The difference between those two and the one that's in bold is the one on the right. It's because that one is that one allows us to have some customization on the templates, as we are going to see today. So let me go back to the presentation. So if we have some customization, one of the things that we are going to do today is the changing of a template. We are going to play with it in the next session. I just wanted to give you some links to this documentation about how to change an IG template. If you want to add your logos, if you want to change the colors, if you want to change more in depth your implementation guide, documentation is there. In part, more documentation is coming, but mostly what you want to do is to change the colors and change the logos, which is exactly what we are going to do today. So these are just documentation guidance for how to do these things, and you'll see in the last build there is what I think is even an easier way to document what you need to do to change the colors. So going a bit back to the process, now that everyone has their IG, so if they just take the templates and they can change the colors, that's very fine. Then we see the explosion of implementation guides. So everyone will tendentially have their process, their way of working, but we cannot standardize, and we cannot standardize those processes. We cannot say to a startup, please do this way, because that's the government way of doing. We cannot say to a big company to use the same process of making an implementation guide, like is it the module, the functional module first, and the terminology separate. We cannot enforce that on people. But what we can say is those things like, make sure that you always have a logical model. And if you do have it, make sure that your profiles link to that logical model. Make sure that you have your terminology resources all complete. So make sure that if you use a naming system, make sure that you point to it or include it in your implementation guide. So those entry and exit criteria, like what is the starting point and the target to have a good implementation guide or a consistent implementation guide, we can standardize that. We can provide some guidance. So for example, if you start with documenting implementation guide from the logical model, then maybe some companies more waterfall or some institutions more waterfall. They want to finish the logical model completely and then start the technical implementation. I would prefer to start the logical model to a point that it's reasonably complete and then immediately start the development. But we cannot enforce that, so that just everyone can have their flavor as long as they follow the same touch points, that when the implementation guide is ready, you should have a logical model if you define a new data structure. So we have the besides the artifact models, which is pretty much what I showed you before. We have the structure for an implementation guide. Following this approach of separating the work of the teams, we have in an implementation guide, we typically have some introduction, like what is this implementation guide about? What purpose does it serve? What is it intended to cover? It's very important if you say this is the medication implementation guide, is it for prescription or is it for medication lists? Or is it for the nurses or is it for the community pharmacy? It really matters. So just some intro and the functionality that comes with it. So logical models, applicable terminology, in case it's not commonly known. So logical models, they also have terminology bindings. So terminology bindings can be technical and can be logical. Let me give an example. The value set for task status, that's kind of a technical, it's an implementation value set. No one really cares about that, it's an implementation thing. Although it has impact functionally, but it is a technical thing. Which values belong there? No one really cares as long as it works. As long as it works, we don't care if the status is 0 and 1 or the status is stopped and ongoing. It doesn't really matter. However, for marital status, that matters. So the marital status, they will be that's one value set that we have in Belgium, and that really matters to you to define the right codes there. Also, professions and activities and roles that people have. Those are important because those are the ones for which the access controls rules are defined. We say a doctor can do this, but well, is it a specialist doctor or not? So what kind of value sets do we have there? It really matters functionally. So the functional module has at least logical models and applicable terminology. Then we have the terminologies for everything that covers terminologies, technical or not. The technical scope, which is structure definitions, etc., and then the implementation. As I said, testing and maybe some cool stuff with OpenAPI. As soon as we can do it, we will also add it to our templates. And this is pretty much the process that I mentioned before. So what we want is, given those templates, and this is pretty much what we are going to do in the Let's Build session. We start by creating an implementation guide from Sushi or from the template. Today, I'm going to show how to do it from a GitHub template. We change the template look and feel because it's my company, I want to make my logo, or because it's my government and I don't want to have the HL Belgium logo, or because I'm not allowed to have the FIRE logo yet, so I just need to change it to have my own logos in the meantime, or because it's just work in progress and I don't want to disclose my logos to anyone. And then we set up some feedback functionality. I'm going to show a very simple example of how to add one and how it works. Then the functional team comes in with the scope, the use cases, the logical models, and some examples. Examples in the sense that we want to have a vaccine for a patient that has been refused. Okay, that should be enough for the technical people to implement this in a FIRE resource. Terminologies, technical specs that make the profiles, the actual examples, the JSONs and XMLs, and then we are not covering that today, the testing and the OpenAPI, whatever it is that we need to do to support the implementation. Things that will make developers and geeks like me a bit happier. So as I mentioned, logical data models, they are a basic aspect of having your information governed or having your data well managed. Maybe I'm going to say something that's very obvious, but forgive me for those for which this may not be obvious. if you don't define your concepts well, there is a risk that then you want to reuse the data and the data was not meant to be reusable. For example, the notion of the vaccine code. It's just one recent example. What is the vaccine code? Is it the code of the product? Is it the code of the type of the vaccine, or is it the code of the disease that it's covering? If you don't define that right in the beginning, there's a higher risk that then you want to make some analytics or you want to exchange information, and then you see that two systems, they don't have the same value sets, or they don't really talk the same language, or they have slightly different dialects, because they never bothered to document this in their logical data models. They said, well, it's just the vaccine, it's the vaccine. And we did not bother to say, no, one thing is the product, the other thing is the disease, or maybe those are just the same thing, different codes. But if we don't go through that effort, we risk having fundamental discussions later in the process, and data becomes much less reusable.
José?
Yeah.
I think we have a question from Daniel Freeman.
Daniel Freeman. Yeah, Daniel, go ahead.
I've asked him to unmute. Or maybe it was just in error.
I'll just continue. Daniel, please.
Seems he left us. Sorry. So please continue.
Okay. So yeah. So we have we can have these discussions with the non-technical people, and it's very important to manage the roadmap. So we can say, I want to have something that works in Fire version 4, and I want to have something that works in Fire release 5, or Fire release 4 and release 5. If when release 5 arrives, if we don't have a logical model, it just becomes a bit more difficult to see what did I mean. Is the meaning that I gave to this attribute still the same in the new version of Fire? Especially if we have to migrate, like in Belgium, we have to migrate from an existing standard to a new standard. Whenever you have to do these things, or different versions of your own implementation, it's one thing is to migrate data by redoing the functional analysis from the technical specification, so re-engineering the whole thing again. That's one option. The other option is to freeze the logical model, which will change every 5-10 years. You freeze the information model, what it means, and then from then you just derive the technical things. It makes life much easier. As I mentioned, these logical models, they can have the terminology constraints.
José, on logical models, Diana is asking which is the tool you are using / suggesting for logical modeling?
I have been using Forge when I need to give demos. Sometimes I just do them by hand, because that's it. I had my own Excel macro that I just entered the attributes in a series of rows, and then it created the JSON for me. And since yesterday, I decided to give Sushi a try with a new functionality. And that's actually what I used for this presentation. So there's several options. Sushi does seem to respond well. If you have Forge, please start with Forge, because it gives you an immediate feeling of what you're doing. If you are comfortable with Sushi, go ahead. It's also a straightforward language. You can see there the impact of what you're doing. Don't go into doing JSON by hand or Excel macros, because the Excel by hand is only if you want to suffer a bit. The JSON by hand is only if you want to suffer a bit, and the Excel is just for super nerds that until yesterday they did not have a choice. So use Sushi, the beta of Sushi and Forge to do logical models.
Great, thanks.
Diana, does that answer the question? Assuming so. If not, yell. In Belgium, we also use different terminologies. This is discussions that were very scattered. We have content terminologies, conceptual terminologies. For example, content is like what the list of lab procedure that we have. Concepts is things more like SNOMED, where we define each data element according to its SNOMED code. In Belgium, we have an interesting challenge, which is multi-language. The terminologies have to be multi-language. And we try to use as much as possible the SNOMED international codes. But we also have some national codes like marital status. We also have legacy codes like the professions, and those we have to reuse. The funny example that I retained from last session is that we have an allergy that if you look up the words in SNOMED, the thing that you are allergic to is different. One is the, I think it's just some kind of a shellfish, and the literal translation of the word that we have is not the same thing as in that. So in French, you have one concept, and if you look it up in SNOMED, it doesn't really match one-to-one to the same level of animals. So one is more of a cluster, and the other one is more specific, which is a problem that we have. So we just have to, but that's a problem between terminologies and languages have different levels of ambiguity. So in Dutch, the word is less ambiguous, more ambiguous, so more broad than the concept in French. We have to deal with it. We have to figure it out. And that is actually something that we are very happy to say, terminology guys, please fix it, because we are technical. We are not going to fix that because that's not our competence. That's not our skills. So what we want is to maximize the work that we do not have to do. We have to find these articulation points, like what are the things that we can ask the terminology experts, what are the things that we can use, the terminologies that already exist. And one of the tricks, for example, that we did is when we make profiles, if the profile is ready, but the value set is not ready because there's some dependencies, some things are missing, we just say this profile is active, but the value set is draft. And there's a kind of remark that terminology is missing, which puts the pressure on the terminology people to say, okay, we have to catch up because this is pending on us. We can still release the implementation guide, but the implementers will see that this might change. So it's just a bit of doing a bit of internal, pushing a bit like, hey, my job is done. I can help you if you want, but please notice that this is going to be a draft. And do you agree that we should release? And normally people say, yes, sure, release. But yeah, we have to have these decoupling mechanisms. Otherwise, everyone is waiting for everyone. Technical standardization, we will see just one profile in the Let's Build session, but basically each working group. Oh, sorry, I forgot to mention. All the things that want to become that want to be a standard in Belgium, whether an HL7 Belgium standard or a federal standard, they would go through a HL7 Belgium working group. Even the ones that the government started saying, this is it, we know exactly what we want, even those HL7 Belgium, we invited them to have the working groups, because it's honestly easier to have early feedback from the industry than to have later feedback from the industry, or even worse, have no feedback from the industry and then have the industry saying, we are caught by surprise, we don't really know how to prepare for this. So we want to have welcome everyone in the round table of the working groups. So the working groups is everyone can join, everyone can participate. So this is what the situation that we have in Belgium. It's a very open forum where we spend some of our time explaining how these things work in FHIR, and the actual other part of the time we say, let's just do some work. Who agrees on this definition? Who agrees on this example? Is the cardinality correct or not? So we have the actual work sessions. And then we do profiles. I just put the cardinalities there because maybe we have no profiles, but normally we should have maybe some profiles. And the examples, I put the one to start to say at least one example of everything that we're doing. So this is something that helps us validate that once we do a profile, we say, and this is an example for that profile, because that's the one that we're going to take back to our functional stakeholders and say, hey, is this what you meant by the vaccination that was not successful because the patient rejected it? Is this how it works? Are the dates okay? Is the status okay? Do you agree with this? That's our kind of closing the loop as soon as possible. As I said, sushi for job by hand, you can do this. We also track history of changes. That's a nice feature that I'm not going to demonstrate today, but there's a feature in the implementation guide that allows you to track the history of changes, so that you can see what has changed since I last looked at this implementation guide. And we want to use QA, so quality assurance. We want to have group review and a bit of the feedback that I'm going to show as exit criteria. So basically our criteria is not when everyone is happy, but when nobody has any strong arguments against. This might seem irrelevant, but it's extremely important, because if you ask someone to agree, do you agree with everything? People feel pressure. People feel that they have to be overly ready. People feel that they have to read everything and study everything. So this will take time. If you say, today, knowing that tomorrow your opinion might change or someone else's opinion might change, do you agree that this is at least in the right direction? It makes our lives a bit, well, much easier. One thing that we don't do yet is the creation of example instances. I just mentioned this because as you're going to make examples, you will also see the need to create many examples for the same profile. So this is an example of the vaccine examples that I was mentioning. I had to create, I think it was 20 or 16 or so. So I just made an Excel file that created the JSON for me because I was not going to type the same thing and just copy this and forget the commas in JSON. That was very much error prone. Since I had this infrastructure almost ready, I just did this. I'm just saying this that not to say that this is good, but rather the opposite, to say that this is not that good. We need something else to generate example data. There are some discussions on chat. If you have ideas or if you feel the same pain that I feel when creating examples, especially when creating many examples, please let us know. That might help us put our attention more strongly to this. Maybe we need some parameterized creation of examples. Maybe we need some domain-specific language. We don't know yet what is the solution. There are some discussions ongoing. The testing, as I said, with every conformance artifact that we provide at least one example, which can be used for basic testing. And the next thing that we want to do is, first of all, doing something about OpenAPI. There is stuff ongoing. I haven't been able to create one thing that I can say, this is out of the box. Everyone in Belgium can just click the button and it works. I can do something that works on my machine, but it's much harder to say this everyone can work without asking more questions than me doing it for them. The next thing that we want to do is to add test scripts and testing as a trap, so that when you're looking at the profile, you should also be saying, this is the profile and this is how I want to test it. So you should be able to have that option. We also want to do, and this is just one idea, we want to change it to take the test scripts and convert it to a Postman collection. This is just one crazy idea at this moment because everyone works with Postman. And if we have a test script, maybe we can do that in Postman, so we can have a simple translation between test script and Postman, so that I can just download, instead of downloading the test script, which would require some testing tools for that, we can just click on this and import it into Postman and run the testing in Postman. Another thing that we did also to help our nurses and our doctors a bit more is to have a simple UI to create examples. So we just did this for, I think it was for communication. Yeah, so for the communication resource, we decided to say, this is what we are talking about. It's, as I said, it's much easier to provide the logical model of what we are talking about than a profile. It's much, much easier to provide this graphical user interface than to provide the logical model. If we provide this, anyone will say, oh, I know what you're talking about. I know that for example, the value here has a star. Everyone knows that this is mandatory. If it has maybe a plus sign, it means that I can add more. Everyone is already used to this, and it's much easier for people to relate to this. We are approaching the end. So the next thing we did, this is still being baked, but because of the explosion of profiles we have at this moment, in a very short time, we had 80 something, 89 or so. We have many more coming. We are now working on the medication lists or medication records in Belgium. So that will be a few tens of resources, I guess. We need to keep track of that. So what we have is, besides the list of implementation guides that we will publish, we will also have a list of each artifacts. And this is just one of those ideas to see, what am I looking at? Let me search for medication here. Let me search for profiles. Let me search for the topic of medication or the topic of prescription or the subtopic of prescription. So these are ways to help people find the information. We have this is being built. As you see, there's still some data missing. But I just wanted to share that we are also doing that. It might be a good practice for any of these things. The ones that I'm going to share in the Let's Build, please holler. I mean, you'll learn about this. The ones that are not there, you just have to just reach to us on chat.fire.org. Finally, the tooling. So we have everything is on our repository. We have the templates. Those are the things that I mentioned. We have Belgium IG template. We have the bare bones IGs as GitHub templates. We have something that's history templates, not for today. And we have a script. I will share this with you Basically, the work that you would do in 1 hour, half an hour, you just do in a few seconds. Those are the goodies that we do later. And just to wrap up this first part, understand that we have layers. We have to and that we have to define a repeatable process if we want to grow, and that allows us to define guidelines, templates, and put some automation in content and share the content with one another. With this, I don't know if we have time for questions and answers, but if we do, and I think we have a break now where we can do those questions and answers. So feel free to shoot questions and answers while I have my water.
Thanks, Jose.
No questions?
No, there's nothing left to answer in the chat. So you were very clear. Indeed, we have a half an hour break now. Feel free to get some coffee or stay around. Jose, are you staying in this meeting?
I will be staying, yeah.
Okay, so everyone, feel free to have it open and we'll reconvene at least in half an hour. Jose, maybe I can ask a question. Why would you go for fire logical models over something like just using an Excel sheet and using a different tab for every resource if you start freeform?
That's a very good question. So sorry, if the thing I understood, tell me if that's what you meant. Mm-hmm. If we want to talk to functional people, they understand Excel much better. They understand the logical model. So why do we bother with the logical model, right?
Probably, yeah.
Well, there's one thing to that. I mentioned, but I did not develop further, that this is important for information management. The problem with an Excel file is that everyone will have their own version of this Excel file. They might change it. There's not a central ownership for that Excel file, or hardly. So that is one factor. But I think for me, the most important factor is that if we have a logical model, then we have a process to update and to maintain that logical model, and everything in that logical model is published and is uniquely identified. So if I want to make a structure map between my profiles and the logical model, so if I want to say what is the element that I have to replace if suddenly gender becomes gender identity, so what is that? If I have it on a logical model, then I can actually have the structure maps. So this would be maybe more advanced features, like if something is gone, where is my mapping breaking? So what is missing, etc. So if I want to, for example, test the conceptual or semantic compliance between this implementation and the reference implementation. You're from the Netherlands, so you know the ZIBs, the clinical
building blocks.
Yeah. So if we have that reference model as an implementation guide, then you can say, well, the next version of the model will remove this attribute and we'll split that into 2 attributes. It becomes easy for us to do, if we say in the future that the structure map needs to be done for the critical profile, like patient and medication, etc. Those need to have a structure map to map it to the logical model, and that mapping must be complete. That is kind of my wet dream. If you do that, then you can actually test if they are compliant. You can technically test if they are compliant. It's no longer a matter of opinion. Of data traceability is actually written down that this person declared that this field is that field over there. And that gives us a lot of power when you want to do, first of all, road mapping, when you want to do things like privacy, because it's very easy to say this thing is not sensitive because it's just, the medication that is prescribed. Well, but maybe that's a technical decision, but maybe the logical guys or the clinical guys, they will say, no, we have extensive discussions. And if this medication belongs in that category, so all in the functional level, if this has that kind of type or whatever, or that category, then it automatically becomes sensitive. And that, once you write that in the functional level, you can trickle it down to all the profiles. But the only way to verify that this is really implemented on the technical profiles is by having this, not by an Excel that you can interpret differently between people, but having some formal mapping. So that is something that hopefully in the next year or so we can start covering.
Nice. Yeah, makes sense. So if anyone would like to ask a question, I think you should be able to unmute yourself. If you are not, feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you. We have one-on-one access to José here. So,
okay, meanwhile, I'm just opening the next thing.
Great. If you would like to take a break and get some coffee, feel free to do so.
I might take some quick break. Let's see if people have questions.
Do you know, so always when I Google for a logical model Fire, the only thing I find in the core Fire spec is a page from like a very old Fire version.
Yes. And
did it get removed from the core spec? Or?
Yes, I think there was one commit that removed it because it was really just a stub. It was actually at the same time that I was saying, you know what, this is not complete. I want it to be more complete. So I was starting to type something and asked for some feedback, but this was just shortly before, you know, so one guy is trying to work on the content. The other guy says, well, this is not complete. So we just kill it for now. And then we
taking too long. Yeah. Okay.
So let's see if it comes back. Again, I think it's one of the things that Fire should have better documented. Just not let things buried in the technical realm.
Yeah. I think the Fire mapping language also makes heavy use of logical models, right?
Yep. Well, it can be applied to logical models. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, then if you give me a couple of minutes, I'll be joining right back.
Yeah, sure. See you in a moment.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Oops, that's right. Where is my presentation?
José, I think 5 minutes before the start, I'll put the countdown slides back up.
Yep, thank you.
So I think I'll monitor both your sessions now in Hoova, because some people will probably not have changed their page.
Okay. They might be joining the other one. Okay.
Yeah.
If you could do that, please.
Sure. Not a problem.
Yeah, this is Jeremy. I did paste the same Zoom link into essentially the back end of both sessions so people can join either session but end up at the same place.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So they'll probably also ask questions on both places.
Oh yeah, that's a problem.
Well, it's not a big deal. Just switch back and forth.
Do we have questions on either?
Not yet. Nothing unanswered anymore. There's a compliment.
Sorry?
There's a compliment in the chat.
Oh, good. I was afraid that people are so uninterested and find it so boring that they don't care.
I think we had
actually,
65
I would
people.
Okay. If any one of the participants, so while we have this break, anything that you want to discuss on the implementation guides, now is a very good time. I think we'll have time enough, but just enough to do our exercise, and it's a rather complete one, depending on your preferences. But basically, we are going to create an implementation guide from a template. We are going to change some things, change the name, the title, change the colors, add some images, add a nice diagram, talk a bit about those diagrams. We will do continuous build for that implementation guide, and we will do add pages, add menus, add logical data models with sushi, add the use case, the diagrams, enable the feedback feature, adding a profile also with sushi. We will, and then we'll do all that if you want with one single script. That's just spoiling the surprise. So if you don't want to do it, just wait for the last bit, and then everything will be done automatically. And just a couple of tricks at the end. So this is pretty much the program for now. I think it's manageable. It gives us some time to explore a bit. If people say, "Oh, why are we doing this? Why is the menu not like that? Or how can we change that color?" That will be. We have time for those discussions. So if anyone has ideas or thoughts or requests, please.
José is here for you now. You don't even have to hire him as a consultant.
If we are still quiet, then I take the opportunity, I guess.
Yes.
I am Casey on it.
I guess.
When you create the implementation guide, you run publisher, right? To do that.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So publisher wants a very strict folder structure to put your things in, right? If I'm not mistaken, the resources you have to put in an input folder, if I'm not mistaken.
Those are the kind of questions that I like. Actually, no. There's a couple of constraints there. You should do things in a segmented way, but it's really because of what I just mentioned before. Like, you want to have teams owning their content differently, so you don't want the vocabulary folder to be messed up by the testing folder. But in fact, the way that it works internally, and that's I'm very happy to share how that works. You can pretty much put things wherever you want within some limits.
Yeah, okay, but maybe Sushi will put the resources for you in the right folder structure.
Nope. Sushi Sushi is putting everything into the same folder, which is the resources folder.
Right. And that's also mandatory by publisher, right? It has to be one flat folder. It cannot be a folder tree, right?
That you are correct. So you cannot put your resources and then the French-speaking resources and the Dutch-speaking resources in subfolders there. That is correct. unless
Okay.
you change your template to say, well, in my folders, I have a different folder structure. So there is a parameter that we have there. If you want, I can share, I can show where it is without teaching how this works. But I mean, I could, but I don't think we have time. But there is one way, there is one file there that controls it. Let me see if I remember where it is. It will be not here. So this is just the source for implementation guide. We'll see that today. But let me see, where is not this. We will not, this is not the file that you want to change. Changing that, what you just triggered is not something that you do lightheartedly, but it basically comes down to, there is, no, actually, no.
José, maybe in the meantime, were you able to zoom in this interface? Because it's still a bit small for me.
Oh, sorry, I forgot. I completely forgot that.
I have a big screen, I can see it.
Is it,
Here.
what, is it better now?
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, I have a huge screen at home, and then I have a beautiful setup at home, and then I go to run DevDays, and I only have my laptop screen.
Indeed, I'm having a big screen as well, so yeah, I never know. There's two things. So first of all, if you want to do that, so sorry, if I'm talking about this, I'm thinking, how would I do this for Belgium? Then I will change the template. There is a thing in the template that creates that defines where those things are. I think it will be something like, I don't know. There is one of these scripts that says what are let me see, vocabulary. Yeah. Oh, yeah, something like this. I don't know. No, I will not. It's not this one. It's something else. Well, there is one of these scripts that controls which folders you have. However, and this is something that might be interesting for you to know. And so let me just open it. Implementation guide. This page here. This page is your friend. It shows everything that you can do in the parameters, which you can change, if I'm not mistaken, with Sushi or by doing it by hand. Today I'm going to do it. That part I'm going to do by hand. The rest is with Sushi. But you have this thing here, path resource, which is a parameter for the implementation guide, which says a location from which to load resources, which actually means, sorry, just maybe it's, I'm just going to fly over this without any big details. But it means that if you have your implementation guide, I might find it here eventually sometime. Yeah, this implementation guide, this is the one that I built. I can add those parameters here. See here, path resource. I can add this. I can add input / folder1 / folder2. I can add these things. You can do this. Don't abuse this, because if you abuse this, then it might be that the next editor is not familiar with that. But as long as it's within a small team, you can actually override those preset defaults.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, it's not the way I want to go, I guess. But yeah, I understand how it can be done.
Perfect. Thank you. This is the kind of questions that I like. Any more, please?
Yeah, let me throw another one then.
Yes, you have 2 minutes for it.
Okay, yes, a small one. Publisher somehow mandates that each resource has an ID, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of I think Graham once said to me, this is something we probably should have made mandatory from the start in a fire spec, but we didn't. So it's mandatory in practice.
Okay, but we had the impression that the ID was, yeah, you should leave it with the server to create its own ID, right?
Right, but when you create something in an implementation guide, you are actually creating the resources. So you are acting as, you're doing what the server would do. You're saying, this is the thing that I want to create. So for example, let's say if I create a patient example. So if you want to create a structure definition, you don't want the server to give it an ID. You want yourself to give that ID, because that's a conformance thing, and it should not be known with under different IDs. But if you want to create a patient one, who cares if that is a patient one or a P001 or any random number or a UID on the server? Well, but that is not, that is okay. You can still give it an ID, and when you post to the server, depends on how your server is working, the server will say, oh, this is a post, so I will ignore the ID and I'll just give whatever ID I want to give it. So it doesn't affect you.
Okay.
The server can still change that ID even for a conformance resource, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
That's why the conformance resources, if you want to put them on a server, which actually, that's actually something that I might do in a freebie session at the end of this, depends on if you have time. I was playing with it today. After we build the implementation guides, the next thing is let's roll out a server with that implementation guide in it. I was trying to look for one way to do it, and fortunately, I have very clever colleagues and very helpful colleagues. So I have 3 ways of doing it, and I can share them with you today. And sorry, actually, as a teaser, this is all with Happy, but Ward, it will be cool if I learn how to do that with Vonk.
Yeah, we should plan some hacking sessions together.
Yep. I'll share with you how it works, and then you take the idea, and then we can talk.
Cool.
Is this the silence time, or we can continue with the questions?
No, you're fine to continue with questions. I think it is just so people know that they're in the right spot.
Yeah, indeed. Anyone else with questions, with ideas, with strange requests that we can make happen? Oh, I'm saying this because I'm also trying to add some features to the Belgian templates and to other templates. For example, a few weeks ago, I just added the possibility for an implementation guide to show BPMN diagrams because we wanted that. So okay, then it's there. But those are the kind of things that I'm happy to work with, and I'm happy to see some nice ideas around that.
How do you think about hierarchy diagrams to put them automatically in the implementation guide?
Sorry, the what diagrams?
Hierarchy diagrams. We now create them outside, and we put them now ourselves into the implementation guides. So
Hierarchy.
The hierarchy of the base definitions.
So you mean, just to make it clear, let me just where is this?
And where's the cat?
Oh, sorry, I cannot share my screen. You mean the tree structure of a resource or a profile when you see them, right? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Those are very helpful. Those serve its purpose quite well. There is a few things that I think people are tweaking or going to change, which is the difference between the snapshot view and the differential view. I always go to the differential view. I think most people go to the differential view first. Some people, but in some circumstances, you just want to go to the snapshot view because that contains everything.
I think modelers generally look at the differential view, and then, but if you want to implement it, you probably want to know just the resulting data model.
Indeed. What I would like to have is a view where I see in which of remember those layers that I shared. I would like to see in which of these layers has this field been changed, because I know it's not the same as before, but I don't want to click that in 4 layers until I figure out who changed that. So maybe something like that would be nice, but it is possible, but I don't think it's a priority, and yeah, eventually it might happen.
So the music starts in 10 seconds, so people can check their audio.
I love the slide earlier that said, if you can't see or hear this, yes.
It works. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another session with José Costa Teixeira. As I mentioned before, he's a consultant with IMAC and is working for HL7 Belgium. And he's going to tell us more about building IGs with the IG publisher.
Hi, everyone, again. Thanks for joining the session. Let me just put the video in the right place so I can share my screen. Yeah, in this practical session, we are going to share, so we are going to actually do some of the changes that we mentioned in the previous session. For those of you that were not in that previous session, just a bit of context. So what we are doing is that we had a previous session where we looked at some practices that we are trying to use to push in Belgium to have faster growth and faster deployment of implementation guides. We want everyone to be able to produce their file specifications in a consistent format. And so we want this to be very democratic, but very industrial. So in a way that everyone is doing things in a rather consistent way. So for us today, so now in this session, we are going to use some of those, or we are going to put in practice some of the features that enable what we are doing. And what we are doing is making it easy for everyone to create an implementation guide. Really easy, or as easy as possible. Making it easy to provide feedback and to read feedback. Making it easy to see the results immediately of what you're doing, to have some continuous delivery or continuous integration, or what we have is continuous build. Making it easy to customize the implementation guide. Making it easy to add your own logos and change colors. We will see how easy it is to add content to the implementation guide by putting some logical. So, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to add one logical data model. We're going to add some narrative. We are going to add some use cases. We are going to add some, well, we're not going to add the requirements, but it's just text. We are going to add menu entries just to share how that is done, so that people within some limits, they can add their own menus to the implementation guide. Then we are going to have one profile. I did not have an example ready because to be honest, I just forgot. But that's also easy. I will be using Sushi for the two artifacts that I'm going to create, which is a logical data model and a profile. And throughout the session, and I think this is going to be a rather interactive session, or at least exploratory on my side and on your side. It would be good to have feedback and questions and ideas and say, oh, what about this? Can we do that? It would be really good to have those ideas. So if you want to do it, I know it's maybe a bit late to do that, but you still have a couple of minutes while you maybe multitask a bit. If you want to do the things that we are doing, if you want to build locally, and if you don't, so if you're not able to build locally now, and if you want to do it, don't bother, because that will take you a lot of time. But if you can already have implementation guides built locally, so you already have Jekyll, and if you have Sushi, then you will be able to do these things and see the publication on your machine. Don't worry if you don't see it on your machine. We will actually set it up so that you can see it online. But if you're using Sushi and if you want to do it to run it locally, you might want to do it. When I'm just remembering one thing, I don't know if it will work, but you might want to run Sushi to install the latest version of Sushi, and you do that by running this command line. Actually, let me just check one thing, because I think with this change in sushi because it's still a beta. I don't know. I do not know what will happen. So this is what we're going to build today. It's this implementation guide. So the end result of today is going to be this specification. Yeah, and there is the profile is there, but logical model is missing because the local the online build of sushi doesn't yet have the right version of sushi. Not to worry, I will show you how it works locally, but for a few more days, I guess, the local build will not be able to include sushi logical data models. So yeah, so if you want to do it, if you want to have everything locally, these are the tools. Don't bother if you don't have all those tools. But if you do have sushi, you might just install the latest version, then you can see locally what you're doing. And of course, you can do online only. The problem with going online only is that you have a few minutes, besides the sushi issue, you have a few minutes latency. So between you commit and the time that you actually see the result, it might take a few minutes. So for you to see the result of the build. So as a recap, this is the process that we are trying to push for. We want everyone to be able to set up their own implementation guide and change a bit the look and feel and provide feedback for the implementation guide so that everyone can comment on that implementation guide. We want the functional teams to do functional stuff, use cases, a scope definition, like what this implementation guide is about. We want them to guide the creation of logical models. That's why we have the logical model in our scope. And we want them to also define examples, which we are not going to cover, but again, it will just be a bit of narrative and maybe some structured text. So that's the functional team. Once the functional team says, okay, guys, we are done. Now start making those things that we need. Those things that we need could be the terminology of this. So it could be the value sets, code systems. I am not going to add value sets and code systems to our scope, because it's going to be more of the same. It's just going to be going to sushi, learning how to do it, or going to the tools to edit code systems, so the Fire toolkit, or just doing them by hand. And I think Forge also creates value sets. Ward, can you confirm? Sorry for asking.
No, I would rather use something like Snapper from CSIRO, for example. Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we can create those value sets, or you can create those value sets and import them into the implementation guide. You can create profiles. I'm going to share one profile. And then, as I said in the previous session, the testing and open API, that's something that we really want to do, but we are not ready for this yet. So the tooling is not ready, so we will not cover this today. So the first thing, and actually let's get our hands dirty. Let's pick a GitHub template. I'm going to do that now. So let me just do one thing on my machine, because actually I want to delete the things that I had so that I can start from scratch. Oops, sorry, not this one. So I'm going to have my folder with implementation guides, where I have maybe more than a couple of them. Just going to search for the tutorial. So in this, I already have a copy. In this tutorial folder, I'm going to create an empty one. So please join me in doing that. I'm just going to rename it now. Oh, sorry, it's still being used because it's deleting the other one. Okay, oops.
No, I think you already have one that's also named.
Sorry.
Right?
Yeah, no, that's what I deleted, but it did not realize it was deleted yet. So, oops. Okay. What happens?
Just make it.
I'll just create something else. I'll just create a tutorial actually. There it is. So, for those of you in the sushi session yesterday, you saw that you can just start sushi with a command line and do the sushi initialization of implementation guide. The way that I'm going to share with you today is a bit of a different approach. You don't start on your machine, you start on the on GitHub. So I'm going to open a I'm going to open this link, and this is the Belgian base template for GitHub template. And since this is a template, I can use this template to create something else. So basically, I'm going to derive this and create my own clone of this. So I'm on the HL7 Belgium space. Let me just use this template, and I'm going to create something on my own GitHub handle. And I'm just going to create something like tutorial. I'm going to make it public. I forgot one thing, so I'm just going to delete it again, because this happens. And this is actually why I wanted to automate. So towards the end, we'll see a way to automate this. But just to share with you one cool feature, I just want to delete this first. Oops. So if I have my there's just one thing that I forgot to click. So I'm going to use this template, and I'm going to say include all the branches and tutorial. Include all the branches is important for the deployment, which we are going to also to have the continuous delivery there. So it's important to have the include all branches. It just makes your life a bit easier. And that's it. So now you have the implementation guide created. Once you do that, you can just, so we created a repo. You can do a few things here. So one of the things that I do is to create a project. And that project has, for example, so I use this for, let me just start with this. This is a project, and I can make a nice Kanban board with this. And I use the following approach, or the following structure. I use an inbox row, so I don't use the typical to do work in progress and done. I use one extra column, which is the inbox, for one simple reason. Just because someone gives feedback doesn't mean that it is to do. Does not mean that it's something that we have to do. It might be something that we want to say, let's not touch that for now, because it's not something that we want to work with, or not something that we want to address even. So I'm just going to create a couple of columns to do. And done. When you do that, there's a bit of automation that you can do here. For example, you can say when I close an issue, it will be automatically moved to that column, which makes sense. These ones I will leave empty for now. So now I have a Kanban board, and that Kanban board will show the issues on my implementation guide. So let's just create an issue just to see if this works. And I'm just going to create that issue. And that issue is, for example, before I submit the issue here, one thing that you should, if you do this, you'll quickly get familiar with is that you should assign it to the project. Oops, not this one, this one. So I'm just putting this on the tutorial IG, so it's better that I do this. If I don't do this, it will not show on that Kanban board. Now that I've done this, I can submit it, and you now have your Kanban board, which shows the issue as it is. This makes it very easy for you to start managing your work. It's a bit like Trello for those of you who are used to this. It's really a simple Kanban board. You cannot go wrong with this. And it helps us, especially in the matter of transparency. We want to see who provided input. It's not something that's in an email that you can delete by accident or not by accident, or something that you can leave unopened. It is there. It's captured transparently who provided inputs, and then you see who is working on what. So that's the normal thing. So after you do this this thing, let me go back to the presentation to get back the steps. Create a project and a Kanban board. So we are there. We have a GitHub repository. Now we want to adapt our implementation guide. The first, because this is an empty implementation guide, so it has some content. Let me show the source. And this one has, you see, has already the scripts, has basic input, so it has all the folder structure. It has one implementation guide, but it's still a generic flavor. It's a vanilla flavor. So the first thing that we want to do is to change this. So actually what I'm going to do now is just to clone it to my local machine. And actually I should not have had, no, that should work still. I will open this with my Git client, and I'm just going to, oops, let me share what I'm doing. I hope you can read my screen, but it just says, where do you want to clone it? And I'm just going to clone it to this folder. That's it. So at this moment, I now have an implementation guide that I can build. If I try to build it now, it will build. It will show a very empty implementation guide. So looking at this, I will not build it just yet. I will build it after I do a few more things. But this is the this is the implementation guide. Where is it? Let me just open the editor, and I'm going to open that folder. IG. So this is it. This is the content that I just cloned. I have input. So the next thing that we want to do is to go here and make it not vanilla flavor. So that's one of the steps. You just go here, and there's a few things that you should change. Those things, for your convenience, they are listed in the presentation, which I'm not sure why is it not showing. Oh, because I'm not running this. Yeah, so these are the things that you should change at least. The ID of the implementation guide, the URL, where it's going to be hosted, the name, the title, the publisher, the contact person, the description, of course, and a package ID. Give it a package ID. It's really important to have a package ID there for one of the steps at the end. So once you clone your implementation guide, the next thing you might, or one of the first things that you do is exactly to change these things. So let me see if I remember what I had for this. So I'm just going to do it 7. But I'm just going to call it met schedule. Let's get. So I'm just going to make, at this moment, this was just one idea. I'm just going to create something that shows the patient when do they have to create their, when do they have to take their medication. So it's just one implementation guide with one profile, and that profile is going to say how in Fire you say this medication is for 8 o'clock, this medication is for 4 o'clock, and this medication is to take at midnight. That's what we are going to do here. Just one profile for that. And then you might want to change things like this. And then Fire slash have there's a bit of a syntax to this. I can share a link with you. That is important, not for publishing, but to make sure that when you have the final publication, that it doesn't mess up the IDs and the names. So there's a bit of a syntax there, but for now, just what I did is just put the ID there. Implementation guide /ID there. Don't ask me now why. If we have time at the end, you can ask me why. The name is schedule, and for those of you who were in the previous session, you will see that why I'm going to do this. Be medication schedule. I can do this, so I should do this. And then I have a nice title here. Something like this. This is what's going to show on the title of the implementation guide. We'll see it in a second. Publisher is what working group or what publisher you want to have. It can be your company, etc. I'm just going to go here. So normally you do this. Belgium.org and like this. I also do that. So IG. If you don't mind, I'm going to shorten the typing. You should, of course, put a bit more of complete text here, but I just wanted to show this. So I just changed the ID. The ID. Oh, sorry, the ID is wrong. I've done this, and because I was confusing this with a package value. Apologies. So this is the so this is the package ID, the description. These are the things that I really should change. Once I do this, I have a slightly improved version of my implementation guide. The next thing that I will do is to change the name of the file name. This is not needed if you use Sushi, because Sushi actually takes the ID for the name, so you don't have to bother with this. So if you do these steps by Sushi, if you want to do this, so some of these steps, they are bypassed. You can bypass them if you do Sushi. But since we are doing this from the template, from the GitHub template, you have to do it. You can still leave the old name, but that will create you some minor difficulties towards the end. So what I'm just going to do to create to change the file name, so you'll have the presentation at the end. Just rename the XML, but make sure you update the ig.ini. I'm going to show it, and I'm going to explain why while I'm doing it. So you have here the myig.xml. So let me just give it a name that is consistent with my ID. It's always good practice to keep the names of the files consistent with the IDs of the resources. The implementation guide publisher really likes that. It's not mandatory, but sometimes it creates me difficulties, and I don't want those on you as well. Once you do this, you just change the name. But there is one parameter here that's very important, which is what will the publish when you run the publisher, what will the publisher do? And the publisher will do this, will publish this IG, which we'll find on this folder. So the folder input / myig.xml no longer exists. So that's why we have to change it to med-sched. And the template is still the HL7B Fire template. That's the template that comes automatically with the package that I just cloned from GitHub. Let me just try to build this. Let me see if it doesn't explode in my hands, if I did something wrong, but I'm sure I got it at least almost everything right. So while it builds, it takes 1 minute. I will just go into the next slide to explain the next steps. So the next steps is to add a local template. So if you want to change the colors, there's 2 ways of doing this. Either you make your own full-fledged template, which might be or will be an overkill, because you have to host it yourself. You have to create a bit more of context, but it might be necessary if you want to say, I want to create this for my company. Then everyone that is, especially if you are in a multinational company, then you do this once, and then you just have to change that line of text to be your own template package. So this is the package name, not of the IG, but of the template. So if you use another template, then you get everything that comes with that template. So that's one way to change colors and logos, etc. But that's not the best way. The best way if you just want to change the colors, the best way is to create a local template. The local template is what I'm going to demonstrate next. As soon as it builds, and it seems to be building, it's warning me about an issue, but I don't really care about that at this moment. It's not going to impact us. Give it a few 30 seconds, and then it will be there. So I will meanwhile already start doing the template changes. Let me see if I can copy this. I have to go away from this mode, and I have to go into the normal display mode. If you don't mind, I will just continue the session in this mode, because I need to copy this. So the way to make a local template just for changing colors, that's what we are going to cover here today, is just going to be creating a package JSON file that we are going to do that we're going to put in the right location. And the location is is the following. To do a local template, you go and create another folder here. Oops, let me see if I can. Where is this? I cannot create a folder. Yep, I can create a folder. So I can say local. In that folder, I create another folder called package. I'm saying this, and I'm just going to do this. Don't worry with this. There's one shortcut to doing this. So let me just do it quickly. Where's the create folder? Create folder. Here I'm going to. Sorry, I just created a file. I should just create a folder. Okay. And then in the local template, I create something called package. And then in the package, I create a file called package.json. And that package.json has the following content. And this is the important thing. I'm just calling it my template. I could call it whatever. And I'm just going to say this template, this local template, is nothing more than an extension to the Belgian template. So I'm just going to say this is the base of this local template, and that base has this dependency. Of course, if you have this as a base, you have to put it as a dependency. So this is it. Once you do this, then you have already your local template. So meanwhile, let's quickly look at what the output of what we just did. So when you build an implementation guide locally, the result, for those of you who are not familiar with it, let me just show it. It's here. It's on the output folder. These folders are created, and you have an index.html. Oops. It's a lot of icon. So I just go to the index. There's our implementation guide. So this is what it takes to start creating an implementation guide. You have the medication schedule implementation guide. That's the name that we gave it. The version name is the one that I had. And you see this package ID, all the things that we've done, and the links to HL7 Belgium. These are the things that I added before. It has some very draft pages to get you started, and a simple menu structure, but that's it. Now, what we're doing now is to change the look and feel of this a bit. So I just created the.
José?
Yeah.
Maybe you can paste this package.json content in the Hoover chat if you want other people to.
Let me see if I still have the Hoover chat open.
Copy paste this.
I will just.
You can also Zulip it to me or whatever you want.
I don't have Zulip either, so I will just put it there. You are correct. Actually, I will do one better. If you go to the, so go here. Actually, I was going to say this to the end.
Okay.
If you go here to the github.com HL7B tutorial IG, this is the actual output of what we are doing. And at every step, this is a cheating that I should be doing myself, but I'm just having fun. Every step that I'm doing, you see, change the title, update the XML, add the local template, all these steps are here. So you can just go here and see the content of what changed. The local template, for example, it's here.
This link is already in the chat and also in your session description.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ward. So what we are doing is adding a local template at this moment. So you see that's local template /package.json. That's the file that I changed. The other thing that you, let me just continue to fly blind here. So you change this from at this moment, you have a local template. The problem is that you don't use it yet, so you don't do anything with it until you go again to your implementation guide, ig.ini, and say, I'm going to do this. And the way to refer to a local template is documented over there in this commented text. What you do is to say, instead of template being a package, which then the publisher will look up, where is this package? You just do hash and then local template. Once you do this, and if I've done my things right, it should work. I'm just going to see if it builds. So it's trying to run sushi, nothing to do on sushi, and it crashes. Right. Local template /package.json. Why? Oh, because I did not name my file correctly. That's good. It should work a bit better. You see the advantage now of doing local builds, because these things will happen. And towards the end, I will share one way that these things should not happen often. Sorry, just one quick time check. What we have, what, almost 20 minutes? or Jeremy. I don't know if anyone can help me
Oh,
with
sorry,
that.
I was double muted. 16 minutes left.
16 minutes. Okay, so let me rush up a bit. So we have this, and then we change the colors. So the other thing that I'll just stop the build now. The other thing that we will do is to change the colors. The way to change the colors is, you can also see this, is to add and you have it on the presentation. You add a you can add a file with a CSS file in your local template. So just in a specific location. So local template. Let me just create a new folder, and then content, it's assets. Yep. There, I'm going to create something called CSS. This is a rigid structure that you want to follow, but in there, I'm just going to create something called a file called colors.css. So this is the CSS file. The documentation for this, you also have the link in the presentation. There is a link. I'm just going to show it to you. The direct link is actually also there. You have changing colors. If you want to see which colors to change and how they impact the template, this is it. You see all the colors highlighted here. You can see, okay, I want to change the IG title color. Well, the one that I had is, let me just change the color here. This yellow box, it's number 15. Okay, then I'm just going to, where's 15? Publish box background color. So that's 15 here. Just going to put it to, or I can put, of course, whatever color I want. So the other thing that I need to do this. So this is why I have this list of commits in the sorry, where is this? I need to go to the Belgian one. Sorry, this one. This list of commits, this is the things that you have that you can change, and I just go to do this because it's quite a few things that I have to change. So I'm just going to see if I missed something. Okay, the color change, that's the one that I just changed. But before that, I added the local template. So let me see if I forgot anything about the local template. And the local template. So what files did I change? I think I forgot one file, only one file. So this is this is done. The color CSS is done. This file is the one that I forgot, and this is important to share with you. So I'm just going to speed by this very quickly. So in my package, I will have an includes and an append fragment CSS. Very briefly to describe to you, this means that in my when the implementation guide is looking for files to compile the template, it will just it will just append that file to the file with the same name. Let me just do this here. So this is called this file is called I don't know if this works as it should. I'm just going to do this here. So the file that I want to create is a file called append fragment CSS without a space at the end. So this means that there is a file in the template called fragment css.html, and this content is going to be appended to this. That's all it does. The explanation of that we hope to document that soon, but believe me, this is the way it works. Once you do this, you have your template you have your local template. So if I build now, my colors should be different. I will do this at the same time that I set up the most important thing here, which is the continuous build. So this is actually one of the key tricks for today, is to go here. So this is the phase where the central group, or HL7 Belgium in this case, say, hey guys, we created an implementation guide for you. You can change the colors, you can change you can add images, but the most important thing is activate the GitHub build. And for this, there is a couple of ways to do this. I'm just going to show one of them today. you just have to copy one file into your repository. And once you do that, you have this. So this is the GitHub workflows main.html. And from this moment on, also for sake of time, I'm just going to incorporate this into the other implementation guide that I was working with. So into this one. So first thing, what I was doing before, oops, sorry, I'm just going to commit these files that I just changed. Yeah, so it is building, so I can trust it is going to be okay. Let me just commit these changes. First commit. And I'm just going to post to push those changes to the to GitHub. So my content is now on GitHub. The changes I committed, and those changes will be yeah. So the template is there. It should build okay. From now on, this has the content, but what I want to do is to make sure that this builds locally. And this is the important thing here, is to have, for example, so remember the checkbox that I activated was the GitHub pages to have this thing here. I'm just going to show you in a second why this is important. So I'm just going to add one file. I'm just going to do it online now instead of doing it locally. I could do either, doesn't really matter. Just going to create one file, and that file is going to be the file that I had. Where is it? Oh, sorry, too many tabs open. This one. Oh, not this one, sorry. That's the previous commit. I'm just going to go back here. We're going to activate this GitHub build. So I'm going to copy this file. So all of the implementation guides, continuous delivery, so the continuous build that you want to do, everything has been simplified and put into one script. So this script will take care of everything for you if you have the GH pages branch active. So basically, I just do this. This is the file that I'm going to create, and I'm just going to put the content there. Yeah, I'm sure there is an easier way to select all and copy, but I just don't know it. So this is it. Once you have the this file here committed to the master branch, it will start building the implementation guide whenever you do a push. So from now on, and this is the thing that takes a couple of minutes, from now on, you will see here this yellow dot. It means that it is building. It's actually downloading the implementation guide onto the cloud, downloading everything that it needs, putting sushi in there as well, doing everything, and running the implementation guide like I was doing locally. So this is the place where you want to be if you want to say from now on, just add content. And actually, the other commits that I have, I'm just going to take a few of them. So I'm going to skip the logical model if you allow me, because that will not show. That's actually just a simple thing. But I'm going to add a page and a corresponding manual entry. So adding a page is very simple. You just have to do three things. And this, I hope this repository works as a cheat sheet if you need it. I'm just going to create one page. I'm going to create a markdown page, and the pages go into the page content. So I'm going to go into my IDE and say, where is my page content? There it is. I'm going to create a file. I think it was called scope.md. Is that correct? That was a scope.md. Indeed, I'm just going to create the content here. So this page is now going to be taken up by the implementation guide if we tell it about the page. And to do this, I'm going into the to my XML, so to my implementation guide, and say, oh, don't forget that you have a page. So this XML file that you have here is the one that contains a list of pages, as you can see here. Pages. I'm going to put this right after the index. That's it. If I want to add a menu entry, maybe for the sake of time, I'm just going to skip that because that's just one more file. This is it. From the moment that you do this, your page is going to be there. So I'm just going to do this to sync, and then to sync back my changes that I just did. Page. And this is pretty much from this moment on, this is what you do. You just commit changes after changes, and then you go back, and then you go to your repository and say, let me just refresh it. And you see, yep, it was there. I don't know why it's not building, but Let me see if it already shows something. Yeah, it's building twice because I just made a commit, and it should show now like this. So this is the thing that I wanted to show, one of the key things. If you have this continuous build with this script, it doesn't build on build.fire.org/ig. It just builds on your own GitHub pages, which will be your handle, your GitHub handle /github.io/tutorial.ig. So this means that you can do this without putting on the Fire server if you don't want to, without overloading the Fire server if you are really unsure about what you're doing. And this is it. Remember that I changed the color from yellow to cyan. It is here. So this is this is one of the changes, or this is one of the key changes that I wanted to introduce to you today. The page I added, let me see if it already shows up in the implementation guide. Where is it? Yeah, let me see if it shows in the table of contents. By now I should have a, not yet, because this is the 5-minute or so delay that exists. Eventually I would see here a page called scope that I just added. One thing, and I think I will stop with that. Just there's 2 important commits here. One is the sorry, let me just navigate back. One is adding a diagram. So to add a diagram, we use a tool, or I use a tool, and some of us add a tool which is PlantUML. To do this, you just add, again, you can consult it here. You add a diagram in the PlantUML syntax. So you just go to plantuml.com and you learn all about the syntax and the type of diagrams that you can do. And this would be a simple sequence diagram. I'll just going to show you the end result. If you allow me, for the sake of time, this is this would be the diagram source. To do that, you have a diagram, but to have the diagram displayed, you need to put it in a page. So you also create a page, which is the use cases page. And this use cases page is exactly the same thing as I did for the scope page. I just create one page. I put it on the XML. I just create a menu entry for that because I want to. And the only thing that you have to do is to do this. Include metsked use case 1, which is the file name for this. So if this is called metsked use case 1.plantuml, you take the file name, you replace plantuml by svg, and then you have your picture. I'm just going to show you because I already baked this before we started. So this is one of the important commits, is adding a diagram. You can do things with it. And one very, very important thing, so I will not even add the profile because that's sushi, you know that. Simple feedback. There is one feature in the implementation guide template since some time ago, a few weeks, months ago, where if you add something to this feature.yaml file in your data folder. So let me just add that in my input data features. It has a lot of anything. Just going to add this. What it does is that what I'm saying is that there is 2 types of feedback. One, and they both point to a URL. One points to this URL, which is projects.1. I'm just going to show you this one. This is the Belgian one, not the one in my repository, but this just points to the Kanban board that I just showed. Of course, this will be another Kanban board, but you see, it just goes directly to the Kanban board. And the other one is the direct link for you to submit a new issue. I'm showing this on the pre-built implementation guide. That's why you don't see the issue that I just created before. So this file here, if you activate it like this, if you say active true, and this is a dashboard. So dashboard is maybe not the best name, but this is how it works now. If you do this, it will create 2 URLs. So 2 links at the bottom of the implementation guide, and they will point to this one to the Kanban board, and that's why it's called issues. And this one is going to point to the page where you submit a new issue if you are logged in as a GitHub user, and then it will be called submit issue. Let me just show you how it works because I want to have some time for questions. Once we do all that, so in this is the one that I had changed before. Let me just zoom in a bit. You see here there's an issues and a submit issue. So these are the things. You click on this one and you open the issues Kanban board. And if you click on this one, you go to the new issue page.
We have 50 seconds left if you want to ask questions.
So that's actually what I wanted to cover. The one thing that I wanted to share with you, and please give feedback on chat.fire.org, is the next step to this is to deploy a server automatically. So we have just been experimenting with saying, now that we do this, let's create this, now that the implementation guide is published automatically. So I don't have to do anything else. I just commit resources, and that's what it's going to show up. Once we do this, then we can actually deploy a server based on this. And unfortunately, I cannot show this, but reach out on chat.fire.org. And I would like to ask shortly, I have time, but the session is going to end. Any questions, any doubts, any feedback that you want to share with us? Anyone? Please unmute yourself. I don't know, how is the chat box and Q&A?
Thank you very much for this introduction. It certainly contains some constructs that I will have to look into. It's promising. It's very nice.
Very good. I know we were limited in time, and good that we trimmed it, but still it's a lot of content. Please reach out on chat.fire.org or on Hoover. It will be a pleasure to share as many details as I can. And with that, if we don't have any further feedback, I would thank you for joining the session. Thank you for the patience. And please, if you want to repeat any of these steps, it's very easy. Just go there to the tutorial IG in HL7BE. You have the link, and just look at the steps that we would take, and just play with it at home and see how it works and give feedback. Thank you very much, and have a good afternoon and a good evening, or a good rest of the day wherever you are. Thank you.
Thanks, José. I can confirm that it just finished deploying on my GitHub pages. Good.
Perfect.
Nice. Great.